Welcome everyone to another edition to As Above So Below Radio. When you get a chance, please visit the website holisticadvocate.com and sign up for our free newsletter, as well as access to our articles and links to various health-related resources that empower you to gain control of your health. Also, take a moment to subscribe and become a member. You'll not only gain access to all of our commercial-free, subscriber-based interviews, but also know that you'll be treating yourself to an hour that will help invigorate your curiosity, stimulate your intellect, question the status quo, and ultimately awaken your understanding to the world we live in. Today's guest is Patricia Cori. Patricia is an author, teacher, lecturer, radio host, and spiritual guide to sacred sites of the earth. Having been immersed into the New Age movement since the 1970s, she has since then applied her clairvoyant abilities to help others and is a highly recognized figure in the spiritual movement, offering courses, seminars, and workshops throughout the world. She has written a series of books known as the Sirian Trilogy, which focuses on the Sirian Council. Having given this brief introduction, it's my pleasure to welcome her here. A nice warm welcome to you on As Above So Below Radio. I got lots of questions here to ask you. And, for any listeners tuning in here for the first time or trying to, in this case, find out who you are and so forth, can you just give a brief background and how you pursued your calling into doing spiritual work?
Okay, thank you, first of all, for the welcome, the warm welcome. It's a joy to be with you and to discover your work.
Likewise.
My background, boy, I have to go way back to my childhood because I was a psychic, very psychic child, and I had a very powerful mother who allowed and encouraged that in me. So as a child, I was already talking to these little beings that we used to call the little blue people. And I've mentioned that in several interviews, so I don't want to really delve into it too much. But in essence, I have always been a medium. My mom used to say you walk between the worlds, and that's a term that, in fact, we use now. And I always have. So I've always been in touch with the spirit realm. And my calling started when I was a child.
Right.
And I remember that when I was 11 or 12, I was already asking my mother to send off a letter for me because I wanted to get my hands on the Blue Book.
Right.
I was convinced about UFOs, and I wanted to get the Blue Book information, and so I was off and running as early as then. But as you will know from reading the books, there was a huge leap when I went into the Julia Crop Circle in 1996. Had an out-of-body experience. It was pretty profound. And from there, I started on this new journey with the Sirian High Council. I'd like to just say that I really don't like the term medium or channel, and there's far too much of that streams of consciousness, people calling channeled information, and confusion about that. So I would like to just specify that I didn't intend to be a medium or to be a so-called channel. It just started. It started then and resulted in many books and contribute to a lot of information that we now are seeing come full circle. So kind of an overview in a nutshell.
Right. Well, I'm seeing here that my desk here, 3 books which I've read so far, and they're actually a trilogy. First one, I believe, was The Cosmos of Soul, right?
Yes.
And then Atlantis Rising, The Struggle of Darkness and Light, and No More Secrets, No More Lies, A Handbook to Star Seed Awakening. In writing these books, what information did you, I guess in maybe 1 or 2 sentences, what information did you gather in writing these books from the Sirian Council? Uh, I mean, was it something that did they have an agenda for humanity? And
Well, the putting it into one or two sentences is going to be a daunting task
okay.
because these are really big books and they're full of so much information. But if you would like to know a common, let's say, a few of the central themes of the information,
Mm-hmm.
then I would have to start with the idea, the most overriding idea, that we are immortal beings and that regardless of what is occurring and we are watching and processing, they want to drive home the idea that we're immortal beings and that whatever our process is, we need to remember
Mm-hmm.
that this is only a passage. That's a very important theme. And even though, of course, that is not a new idea, it is something that people seem to have forgotten a lot because in our religions, we are taught that we have a judgmental God. We're sinners from the beginning, and the best we can hope for is to be forgiven for our sins and go to heaven. And of course, the spiritual seeker would probably lean more to a Buddhist approach where it says, I create my own reality. I manifest what I believe, what I think. And so therefore, they drive that home. You are creating this reality. It's only an illusion. And meanwhile, while you're in it, let us share with you some basic facts.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the themes has to do with the Sirian experiment, which has to do with the placing, the nesting of Homo sapiens as a genetic experiment which had the highest intention, the highest good at its base, nesting this species on the planet Earth, which I'm sure you'll want me to elaborate.
Mm-hmm.
And a very important one, central theme, is, excuse me, that we are about to ascend, not as individuals necessarily, not just the planet, but the entire solar system is about to progress out of the third to a higher, more subtle conscious state. So if you'd like me to elaborate those, just tell me and we'll
Please. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I would like to start out by saying that the books were channeled. The first book, The Cosmos of Soul, was channeled in 1996, 97, and came out just before 2000, maybe because it had to get published and whatever. And the Atlantis Rising a year later. So these books, the reason why I bring that up is because they're still extremely fresh, and they now, things that were proposed in those books that were outlandish then, have now begun to occur on the planet. So they've been touted as really prophetic books in that everything is unfolding that's described in them. Atlantis Rising talks in depth about how the process of ascension for us has everything to do with the entire solar system transiting through its own astral cord. And they remind us that even though we're told that black holes are these gravitational pits in the universe where everything that goes near it is sucked in and crushed into oblivion because of the magnetic forces, the council say, no, it's not correct. The black tubes that you describe are tunnels or passageways into other dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
Or they can be between two universes, parallel universes. And that what we are about to experience is the passage through our sun's astral cord and poof, into another dimension, higher dimension. It's very interesting because now NASA is saying we now know that it is possible that tunnels exist or wormholes exist in the universe, and that very possibly we do not understand what black holes really are. Perhaps they are passageways to dimensions. And I love this because it's like, wow, how nice to see the science starting to catch up with spirit and catch up with so much of the information in my books.
Right.
That is a very important aspect, the idea that the star system Sirius already went through this process hundreds of thousands of years ago, and they know very much about it, and so they're helping humankind understand it.
Okay. I'm looking at the Cosmos of Soul here, and one of the chapters is a wake up call for humanity. And in the book, you cite the emancipation, the need to recognize our bondage and identify the jailer so we can recognize our true potential. Um, Reading that passage, would that necessarily imply that we need to look at ourselves, I guess, in a more deeper perspective, our potential? There seems
Yeah.
to be, I mean, the way I'm interpreting this is that most of us, I guess the majority of humanity, unfortunately, they seem to be plugged into devices such as TVs, stereos, cell phones, or any other electromagnetic devices and so forth, and we seem to be plugged into the matrix, so to speak. Um, so I'm wondering, with reading that passage, do we really need to recognize our potential in this important critical time?
I think that there could be no more important aspect of what we need to do at this time than
Mhm.
to look at ourselves and ask ourselves, while we aspire to higher consciousness, while we uh, meditate and do everything. So many people are so involved with those higher chakras and
Mhm.
want so much to break through in every sense. Still, when I teach my workshops or I speak at a conference, I have to ask people to turn off their phones, and inevitably, 60% of the people in the audience have to reach into their purses or
Mhm.
bags or whatever and turn off their phones in the middle of a sacred ceremony.
Right.
So, my first question is, let's wake up and recognize that we are addicted to these toys. They've been imposed on humanity for a reason. It's not just because it's better for our communications. They are devices that are designed. Yes, they also allow us communication like you and I are having now, but predominantly they completely disrupt the electromagnetic energy field of the human body. They disrupt the everything, but when you've got that cell phone on your body, your normal rhythmic flow is disrupted. And you cannot, my opinion, you cannot reach the states of higher awareness without the harmonics of your own energy system flowing in a natural flow. So, one of the reasons why cancer of the brain in children has increased like 500% in
Mhm.
5 years
Yeah.
is these poor little children are sitting there with these. Some children even have two cell phones. This is absurd. And you add that to all the others, the computers, video games, television, telephones, all the collection of iPad, iPod, and you
Right.
can only but understand that
Mhm.
this is very detrimental to the human experience and the animals too. Let's not forget that they're getting it.
Right. It just seems like all these toys are more like distractions.
They are, and they're
Yeah.
very good. I travel all over the world teaching, and I get so exasperated that you can't get off the plane. As soon as they hit the runway, the people turn on their phones, and you're sitting in this container with you've already been zapped by all the radiation of flying,
Right.
and people can't even wait to get off the plane before they're all clicking on their phones, and all these waves are traversing that space. And I'm
Mhm.
amazed people don't understand that this is can't be in the moment, for goodness sakes. What is so important
Right.
that you can't live without these devices?
Right.
So I think it's interesting that we're threatened that they're going to take down the internet, and everybody's all alarmed about that. And I'm curious. We seem to survive without it before. I'm sure that if we don't have it again,
Mhm.
it might very well be a good thing for humankind.
Right. Well, what about diet? I mean, can you talk about how important it is for us to have an understanding of the food we consume and how important it is that we consume raw fruits and vegetables, grains, nuts, and seeds?
Yes, you're speaking of an important passage in the Cosmos of Soul.
Right. Hmm.
And I get a lot of resistance when I speak about this because I'm a devoted vegetarian for 28 years.
Wow.
I wish I could say I was a vegan. I have spurts of being able to be a vegan, but I'm not there yet completely.
Hmm.
But at any rate, from the point of view of health, I think we are all very clear of what we're being offered for food in 2012. The food is genetically modified. I just read an article where they're putting human, if you can imagine this, human genes into rice now. That's the
Wow.
latest experiment. And I don't know what they want to do with that, but one can only guess.
Hmm.
So we need to, as much as possible, understand that this is also deliberate. I don't understand really how far these manipulators of the earth want to go, but putting human genes into a kernel of rice, that is really out there.
Right.
We know that the genetically modified food is bad, but people don't understand, a lot of people don't really recognize what genetically modified food is. And that is, of course, playing with the genetic structure of the food and altering it for reasons that are not clear. So the excuse is we put insect genes into strawberries because they stay red longer. We whatever Monsanto
Hmm.
does. But when you start hearing about human genes being inserted into food, that I find that very alarming. So, for starters, my recommendation coming from the council is we need to be more discerning about food than ever before. It's getting harder and harder to find food that has not been tainted with genetically modified experimentation. The toxicity levels are off the charts.
Right.
Um, Starting with food, well, sorry, with vegetables, I recommend to people that if any way possible, grow as much as possible, grow your own vegetables. And I walk my talk. I have a vegetable garden every summer. I have many fruit trees that are biologically grown in my yard.
Hmm.
I work to maintain that. And of course, the Syrians are adamant about meat. And so I'd like to delve into that
Sure.
if, okay.
Hmm.
The question of meat eating is very sensitive. People get very defensive when I talk about it and resistant. And that's understandable. Number one, if you're a devoted meat eater, you have the anxiety, the rage, the fear, the terror, the sadness, all of these emotions of the animal you ingest at every meal. Whether you want to believe it or not, it's there. And there's a disassociation because we go to the grocery store. Well, I don't, but people go to the grocery store, they go to the meat counter, it's all neatly packaged in plastic with its little red dye.
Hmm.
The association that this is an animal you're eating. It's just, we've been sterilized mentally so that nobody makes that connection. And it should be noted that we're eating dead animal flesh. So that energy or that death, that pain, that harm, you bring into your body every time you eat it. And to people who say, well, actually, I had someone say the other day on a social network, the animals are here to provide us with food. And I almost fell off the chair.
Wow.
Race is oblivious to life, of the life beyond our own, that
Hmm.
we take so much. We take the animals as food because that's their job. I beg to differ.
Right.
So not only is it terrible for your spirit, but the planet is choking to death from just the harvesting of cows.
Hmm.
For example, the Amazonian forest is going down like light speed because the land is being used to graze cows. This is, if you're not able to consider vegetarianism for the health of your body or for the spiritual aspect of it,
Hmm.
consider what it's doing to the planet.
Right. Well, most of the foods that we purchase anyway are just in time ready to cook, foods which are especially prepared to be heated in your microwave. And that's another uh, big no-no for people who constantly use the microwave. That radiation, it really is bad in the long term, right?
It's terrible, and I've been an advocate of getting rid of microwave since for so many years. But the bottom line is the microwave works by rearranging the molecular structure of the food,
Hmm.
and it agitates the molecules. They start moving rapidly, and that's why it heats up.
Right.
But it alters the quality, the molecular structure of the food. It destroys anything resembling nutrition in the food,
Hmm.
and you eat this altered molecular stuff. So you've got no nutrition, and that can not only be bad for you. And then there's the question of, geez, as the Syrian High Council bring up, do you really not have a half an hour to prepare your own food?
Hmm.
Do you know how much love affects the quality of what you're eating? So we all know that if you go to a restaurant where the food is slammed out in front of you, or your order is, we don't even talk about fast food restaurants. You go to a restaurant where the food is presented in such a way unlovingly. It's very different than having a meal prepared at home, or a restaurant that prides itself on what it's giving its clients.
Hmm.
Love in the food preparation. So they recommend that you just get the microwave out of the house, because the waves that come out of that machine don't stop when you turn it off.
Right.
People are oblivious to that. But if you're going to aspire to health, spiritual health, physical health, mental health, there are things that you need to start looking at. Like you asked me in the beginning,
Hmm.
when you enslavement, we are our own worst enemies. Take initiatives that are good for you, good for your family, good for the planet.
Hmm. Good. Well said. Now I want to switch topics here, if I can, here with the Mayan calendar in 2012. Is this calendar in effect telling us that after that pivotal date, December 21st, 2012, time as we perceive it to be will no longer exist? And in
The
fact,
question of the day, the question
yes,
of
yes.
the moment, 2012. I can't wait until the 22nd of December. The 22nd of December, 7,300,000,000 people, and all of our fear
Hmm.
will be confronted with a new paradigm, and that is we got through the fated date
Right,
and we're on our way.
exactly.
So, by nature of that alone, I perceive we're going to have a huge shift.
Hmm.
Of course, I'm sure today we'll be talking about the great shift and the process of that. But in the meantime, in matter of fact, just consider all this fear, all of this deliberate activation of fear in case somebody accidentally isn't afraid. There's the media to make sure that you're afraid of everything. And that is about to pass. So, how exciting for us that we're finally moving through this paradigm. Now, your question specifically was?
Well, I noticed for a fact that our perception or my perception of time is collapsing.
Time.
Yeah, because at one, maybe a couple of years ago, maybe 10 years ago, you can measure 24 hours and you can do what 10 different things in 24 hours. Now, my perception is that there's 16 hours in the day, and I
Yes,
can only do what 4 or 5 things in those 16 hours.
I completely agree that there's a mutation of time, and it's 16 is about right. I know, first of all, many people, and I'm one, are having big problems with sleep. I've never had a
Right.
moment of trouble sleeping. I love it.
Hmm.
And now my clock is completely strange. Do you experience this too?
Lately, I guess I'm the opposite. It's like I'm requiring more sleep.
Lucky you.
Um, I
Well,
guess I'm astral traveling a lot too. I've noticed that.
I think that the process of the time actually mutating is also changing our circadian rhythms, which
Hmm.
has to do with our rhythmic time, our biological time clock of each individual.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the majority of people sleep at night, but there are people who are also night owls. But I have never been. So suddenly I find myself wide awake until 4 in the morning and then sleeping till 10, which is completely nothing I've ever experienced in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And this sense of time, I mean, you can feel it in an hour. You look at the clock, it's like an hour has passed. It feels like 10 minutes. There's some definitive shift in time. And one of the premises of my work with the council is to help people understand that we are moving into a space they call the no time.
Mm-hmm.
This coincides exactly with the Mayan calendar, which depicts the fated 12 December 2012. Of course, we've had discussion about if that is really the actual time indicated on the calendar, but let's say it's not. Let's say it's a few days, whatever difference, considering we're talking about a 26,000th year cycle, a couple of days difference don't matter. But the point is of the Mayan calendar that the calendar runs out supposedly 21 December 2012. And this has been misinterpreted as meaning that's the end of everything, the end of time, the end of humanity, the end of everything.
Right.
And the council, the Mayans are telling us, no, it means the end of recorded time as you know it, and the beginning of a fifth sun, a new time, the no time, where a new whole cycle.
Mm-hmm.
How do we perceive no time? That is probably the most difficult concept in the books, and one of the most difficult aspects facing us right now. What is the no time? Right?
Right.
Okay. They talk about simultaneous experience, simultaneous time.
Mm-hmm.
And the linear time perception that we have, has, as convincing as it is only an illusion. That actually there really aren't any past lives. They are simultaneous lives that we are capable of experiencing whenever we want. So when you go to Egypt and you're in a temple and you say, I've been here before, the council say, actually, you can slip into that lifetime anytime you want consciously. And a lot of this we do in our sleep.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a very hard, just a really difficult concept to explain, much less perceive how
Right.
we could exist without time. And that is something that we are moving toward.
Okay. Next question here. How important is attunement? I noticed that you organize tours and visiting sacred sites and so forth. So how important is it to visit these sites? Do these sites help awaken one's consciousness? Will visiting these sites, these old stomping grounds, so to speak, trigger an awakening for some people?
Absolutely. Let me just say, Martin, that I never impose my beliefs on anyone. So I would like to say that how important it is for anyone is how important it is to them to accelerate their process,
Mm-hmm.
or to be able to help themselves remember their mission on the planet, why they came in. I just said that there is no past life, but of course we still are going to always perceive that because it's the nature of being in this timeline.
Mm-hmm.
So many people who journey with me or on their own are called to certain places on the planet because there's an affinity for that place. And when they get there, they say, I remember. Oh my God, I remember this. And I am a facilitator for that happening for people, just as much as I also tell people, bear in mind that when you go to a sacred place or an energy vortex on the planet, like, of course, the Great Pyramid and the Giza Plateau, you are not only there to extract information or experience, but you are also bringing to that energy source love, constant thought, intention to keep it alive, to keep it activated. For example, I'm not sure when I'm going back to Egypt, but I've brought people to Egypt for 16 years every year.
Mm-hmm.
Every year we go into the Great Pyramid and we do ceremony there,
Mm-hmm.
which do with tuning and toning. And my God, when we almost went last year, it felt like the pyramid was just going to take off. It was so intense.
Mm-hmm.
So there are many spiritual people, groups, and let's say leaders, such as I, who are openly, actively intent upon keeping those sites sacred and activated.
Right. Well, let's. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, unquestionably, your life has changed when you visit some of these places, the Great Pyramids,
Mm-hmm.
the Mayan pyramids, the Mayan lands. I'm just back from Peru,
Uh-huh.
the Azores Islands, Atlantis. This is a incredible world, and it's a shame to miss it sitting in your house in your security zone.
Right. Right. Well, I believe I heard a rumor that they intend to close down the Great Pyramid on December 21st. Um, I'm not certain if that's true or not, but I mean, there are some quote-unquote forces out there that really want to keep, people in the dark, so to speak. Um, but uh, but yes,
No, I'd
I
like to speak about
thoroughly
that.
agree with you. Yeah.
I'd like to speak about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I brought a group to Egypt for 11/11/11,
Hmm.
and we were prepaid a year in advance for the group to get into the pyramid, and we were stopped. No groups got in. The excuse was that the Egyptians said that there was a Masonic ritual that was going to take place in there, so they closed it to protect the pyramid, but that's not true. They
Hmm.
closed it to prevent spiritual groups from going in and doing activations in there
Right.
on that alignment. They closed it again the other day on 12/12/12 for the same reasons. So
Hmm.
groups were denied getting in. And I just want you to know we pay a lot of money to get these groups in there, a lot of money, a lot
Hmm.
of graft, and also we pay the government for that right. And I'm sure they're going to close it again on 21st December. I don't know if it's for good, but the intention is to close down access to the pyramids in general. So they've built their fortress walls around. When I first started going to Egypt, you stepped off of the pavement and you stepped onto the sand and walked right up to the pyramid. And
Hmm.
now it's all barricaded. There are walls, gates. The intention is to lock humanity out. This is not only happening in Egypt. There are also now controls at the pyramids in the Maya lands,
Hmm.
in Machu Picchu, where I was just a few weeks ago. The guards do not allow ceremony. They interrupt you if you're doing anything resembling meditation. There's most definitely intention by the power on this planet to keep the vibration of the planet
Hmm.
under.
Wow. What about Stonehenge or Glastonbury?
Well, thank you for mentioning that. And by the way, I have a group going this summer, so
Great.
if anyone's interested, they should contact me.
Absolutely.
Stonehenge has become a tourist trap. You go there, they've put a walkway far distance. I can't tell you in feet, but significantly distant from the actual monument. You have to walk around on this path. They give you headphones with an explanation, a tape explaining what you're looking at, and that's the end of it. So if you go to Stonehenge, you need to go with someone who can get you into those inner stones. And I have a private access into Stonehenge every year, and you can still get into the temple of Stonehenge.
Hmm.
There are also rumors that, well, more than rumors, there is an intention by the government to, if you can believe this, they're going to build the road. They're going to divert the road that goes around the Stonehenge and take it underneath, like a tunnel underneath Stonehenge, deliberately breaking the energy. And the English are trying to fight that, but it's going to happen. They're going to do that. So there is a concerted effort to break the energy of the sacred sites. Now, question, does it matter? How do you feel about that? interviewer, and I'm asking you the question.
Yeah, I think it's completely invasive. Obviously, the forces that are out there have no respect for these ancient monuments and
Oh,
the energy that these monuments really hold and resonate. Um,
I think it's
it's
more than not having respect. I think it is a deliberate intention
right.
to break the energy, to keep the planet, to lower the planetary energy, which I know we'll get into later,
Hmm.
and to break the spirit of the people, of especially of spiritual worshipers.
Right.
So you either come into our gold crested churches and obey and leave money, or stay home and listen to your boob tube and all of the devices that we use to massage your mind.
Right.
Each each sacred site on this planet is symptomatically being broken or destroyed. And my message to people who feel pain at that idea is that we don't necessarily physically need to be there to be there.
Right.
And that perhaps this process of having these places closed off to us has everything to do with us being prepared to let go of the structures that have been in the past as we
Hmm.
create a new reality for our own existence. But it's painful, especially for someone like me who has spent her life visiting these places. It's very
Hmm.
painful.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. In publishing your books, have you been approached by the U.S. government? I mean, were they surprised when they discovered um, about what you've written about the truth about the moon and Mars?
I can tell you that I've been threatened several times, if that helps, and
Uh-huh.
that there's more in the books that concerns them than openly discussing colonies in underground of Mars and Moon. And some of this information, like Harp, which is this, I think people know what Harp is, this system that is, how do I describe Harp? It's, well, let people read the book. Atlantis Rising goes into to length about what Harp is,
Hmm.
but it's a definitely a military device or tool that is altering our reality on the planet, altering the climate,
Hmm.
and allowing them to use extremely low frequencies to blast even into the earth, fracking and things like that.
Hmm.
That was not to be discussed. Even today, people are really not supposed to discuss it. And certainly back 11 years ago, when that book came out, it was not supposed to be in print. So, yes, I've been threatened. And my idea is, well, anytime anybody wants me to leave the planet, I'm ready to go.
Right.
Not
Yeah.
afraid. Know that there is another dimension, another reality over there. So if anybody decides to knock me off, I will be having coffee with my mom on the other side the next minute. But yes, I think that if you are a responsible voice on this planet that speaks about truth and reveals some of the goings on in the controlling governments of the world, you will be approached.
Hmm. Now, I want to switch over here about the moon. David Icke touches upon the Saturn moon matrix in his latest book, and how these two celestial bodies are in fact emanating signals to cloud our reality, our perception to reality. Do you think this could be the case?
I'd like to start by saying I really respect David Icke. He has really had a lot of courage to
Hmm.
speak out. And I don't agree with everything he says,
Right.
but I respect everything he does. So that said, I I'm not quite sure about the moon, the artificial satellite moon idea. I just I look at this beautiful moon and its influence on life on this planet and how we have revered this celestial body throughout time, the indigenous people. And I just have a real problem believing that it was pulled into the orbit and used as a device to regulate the planet. That would mean that, of course, then all the other moons for all the other planets would have to play the same function, no?
Right.
So I don't think I agree with that, but I'm open to hearing more if more data comes out. I think the moon has been inhabited. It's not a dead planet. I love when they say it's a dead planet or it's a dead sphere. Nothing is dead in the universe. We're soon. Yesterday, I saw footage of now the NASA has identified a river flowing through Titan, satellite's moon. A
Hmm.
river. Now, it doesn't take a genius to know that where there is water and sun, you've got life.
Right.
So this is part of the process of them disclosing what is about to be total disclosure. So as far as the idea of the artificial moon, I can't come out on that. I'm not sure how I feel
Mhm.
about it, but I would be tending not to agree with that. And as far as Mars, I don't think that's an artificial planet. Are you saying that that's an artificial planet?
No, but my understanding is that there are some bases underneath the surface of Mars. Uh,
Yes.
if anyone has paid any attention to any of the photographs, there are some tubules on the surface of Mars. Um,
Yeah.
and obviously, these are not natural formations. Um, you have the face on Mars. You have the works done by Richard Hoagland, who's documented evidence on the fact that there are artificial structures on the planet.
Hmm.
So I'm kind of wondering, I'm pretty certain there is a secret space program that's involved in terraforming Mars. Uh, and obviously we're being kept out in the dark, so to speak. Everything is hush hush. And I'm wondering if in fact, the Syrian Council, they pretty much divulged this information to you when you were channeling the books, right?
Yes, there is significant information, particularly about Mars, and that is that they state, again, we're talking about 10 or 11 years ago,
Right.
that there's an active colony underground in Mars, and that should surprise us because they, you need to believe that only observes.
You there, Patricia? Hello? Patricia? Okay, I guess someone's giving us a message here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're Mars fans. All
Remarkable,
right,
isn't it?
back to the Mars situation.
Yeah.
So the council tell us that many, many planets have underground civilizations, and there are many different layers of underground. For example, they also talk about Agartha being at a deeper level
Right.
than the military complex that has the military governmental complex that is now lining the planet. I mean, these guys have got their own cities down there, right?
Right.
And so on Mars, the council say that there is a complete network of civilization there and that they survived whatever crisis occurred on Mars, which I personally believe was very similar to what we're doing to the planet here, and that is complete annihilation of the eco balance of the planet. And that I agree with you that there has been terraforming going on. And we now are seeing pictures of Mars oceans. We've got forests. We've got more than just the tubes.
Hmm.
I've the most amazing pictures. One great location to find out more information is a website called, I think it's either Mars Anomaly or Mars Anomaly Project, but I'm not sure at the moment.
Right.
But pictures, let's get over this. Come on, you got to be kidding me. Forests, lakes, water everywhere on Mars.
Hmm.
And that is the ultimate criteria for life existing on a planet and for the human race to cultivate life elsewhere.
Right. Okay. All right. I want to just switch over, if you don't mind, here to there's a chapter in the book labeled as of Lucifer and Darkness, and you cite the Anunnaki, the Greys, as well as the secret government, all orchestrating an effort to suppress our awakening. Now, out of curiosity, when you mentioned the Anunnaki, um, are you also referring to the one-third of a spiritual hierarchy that was banished from the higher realms, the Luciferian Rebellion? There seems
What
to
are you
be a
referring to? Is
correlation
that a
there.
biblical a term, Luciferian Rebellion?
You know what? I've heard this term a while back that I'm not certain if you read the Urantia book. It
No.
was okay. Well, this is a book that was channeled some time ago, and there's a chapter there called the Luciferian Rebellion. And the understanding in reading that chapter was that one-third of a spiritual hierarchy, because they were in league with Lucifer, they were banished. And I'm wondering if there's any correlation between the Luciferian Rebellion and the Anunnaki.
Well, for starters, I don't adhere to the idea that any god or any higher spirit would banish at the level of the highest intent of a spiritual hierarchy would banish any other aspect of that hierarchy.
Hmm.
I hate the word hierarchy to begin with
Right.
because that would be adhering to the Judeo-Christian idea that good dominates bad and that um, God or spirit or prime creator is a punishing God. I just
Hmm.
can't buy into that.
Okay.
So I would have to say, no, I don't agree with that.
Hmm.
And um, I can't believe that a third of the spirit warriors, the spirit light, the force, would be banished into the darkness with a Lucifer principle. That
Hmm.
doesn't work for me very well.
Right.
The discussion of the Anunnaki is a very long one. I think we will probably get into that a little bit later
Hmm.
because it has everything to do with the planet Nibiru. And this is information that a number of different authors and channels have brought through with different interpretations. For example, Sitchin glorifies the Anunnaki and says that they were the gods that came to Earth, and others have different interpretations. I have a very specific understanding of their role on the planet, and that has to do with it's kind of a lengthy explanation.
Hmm.
So,
Well, see, the reason why I'm asking is because in Atlantis Rising, you mentioned the Anunnaki, how they first visited this planet about 450,000 years ago, and that about 97,200 BC, they first began the great experiment with the seeding of Homo sapiens. So, in effect, you could say they were our progenitors, correct?
that no, they intervened in the Great Experiment.
Ah, okay.
But let's clarify that. That's very important.
Okay.
The Great Experiment was undertaken by beings from higher dimensions and from extraordinarily developed beings in different star systems. And you asked me, I think, were the Pleiadians involved? And the answer to that is yes.
Hmm.
And other civilizations that had as its intention this organization of beings to birth a, a what they call light body beings walking on the planet, and to create a species of highly developed 12-stranded DNA beings as guardians of the planet and guardians of the entire third dimension, the whole realm of 3D, which is beyond our understanding. And that was Homo sapiens. We were nested on this earth. The Sirians were involved. In fact, they call it the Great Experiment, that intended, like we are doing in our laboratories, only not for the highest good. Theirs was for the highest good of the universe to seed a species capable of that kind of light. In other words, an entire species of Christed beings.
Hmm.
And the Anunnaki, who were expelled from their own process, their own star system, um, when the star Anu, which is the third star in the Sirian star system, went through its ascension process, one of the planets that orbited that star, Nibiru, was expelled. It didn't make it for its own vibrational, let's say, lack, or whatever the reasons were that occurred. It got ejected in that process. The star went on into the fourth dimension, and the planet started a course between Sirius A, the star that is still there, is still in the third dimension, and our star, and it was like ricocheting back and forth between these two star systems. And as bizarre as that sounds, I would also like to inform your listeners that NASA has now come out and actually repeated these words to the point that it sounds like they took them out of my book. They have now come out stating that we now know it's possible that in the process of a star's transition, what do they call it? Transition. Oh, it's possible that these black holes are tunnels to other dimensions.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it's possible that in the process of a star transiting, the planets will be ejected from their star system and gravitate between two stars. That is, God, that came out 11 years ago, and now NASA is saying the same exact thing.
Wow.
So Nibiru got kicked out of that process and has been traveling in this journey between two stars for eons. And they intervened when they found out about the Great Experiment, because they did not want, repeat, they did not want the planet Earth to be so light, for reasons that are explained, that have to do with them trying to throw an electromagnetic grid around the planet and stripping the human race down to two strands.
Interesting.
It's a very complex idea, and it's elaborately described and explained in Atlantis Rising.
Right, right. Okay, well, we're coming down to the end of the first hour, Patricia. Care to mention anything else to our listeners here before we join you in the second hour? I know that you have a book that I'm currently reading right now called Before We Leave You, Messages from the Great Whales and Dolphin Beings. Care to give a brief summary about this book to the public, to the listeners?
This book is a message. Well, I started hearing messages from the whales moons ago, and I have been working as best I can to help save the whales and dolphins. But in that book, I started receiving distress calls from them every time there would be a beaching or a massive beaching. They would call me during that process, and often I would be asleep and I'd wake up drowning. I would feel myself thrashing about with whales and dolphins underwater, and just this most horrific trauma. And this happened over and over and over again. And finally, I just said, please, their message was, please help us, please help us before we leave you, which is, the title is what it is.
Right.
And then after months and months of this torment, they started to give me messages about their plight, their real purpose on this planet and in the galaxy. And it starts out quite painful, listening to their plight about why they're committing suicide, why they're leaving. And that is a controversial idea, that they're actually deliberately dying. It's not that they're just lost and washing up on the shore. They're choosing death over what's happening in the ocean, and that has to do with sonar attacks from the military and every other kind of distortion in the water. And the book elaborates in great detail that their role on this planet and in the galaxy is to weave the frequencies of the ocean, the emotional body of the earth, in a network of musical harmonies that keeps the earth in balance. And that without that balance, the earth is not going to survive, not going to make it through these shifts. So that book is about that, the musical harmonies of the oceans, how the whales and dolphins weave the music, and how it all connects on a bigger picture.
Okay. Okay, great. Interesting summary. That's it for the first hour. Remember to sign up for membership at holisticadvocate.com. We have 3 different subscriber terms available to all of you. Scheduled to be interviewed are Dr. Norma Milanovic, where she will discuss the Arcturians, Ken Rolla, who will discuss holistic alternatives to better health, and the one and only Jordan Maxwell. We'll pause here for a brief intermission as we present the following music. You're listening to As Above, So Below.